On Friday, June 10th, Season 3 of the Apple TV alternate history drama For All Mankind will premiere, and we could not be any more excited.
And amazingly today, we're joined by one of the stars of the show, Krys Marshall, for an interview which Emily and I have had on our bucket list for 2 years.
Are you looking forward to For All Mankind Season 3? Let us know at Space and Things 1 on Twitter and at Space and Things Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, or via the contact form on our website.
And don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. But right now, enjoy episode 92 of the Space and Things podcast.
Oh my God! Unbelievable, but it is great to touch.
You're listening to Space and Things with Dave Giles and Emily Carney.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 92 of our podcast. Now, Emily, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. How you doing?
Yeah, it's been crazy busy here.
Tell us about how you got on last week over at Kennedy Space Center. Let people know what was going on there, because this is ridiculously cool.
Well, last week I was at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station to watch the SpaceX Transporter 5 rideshare Falcon 9 launch, and one of the CubeSats on board was carrying our Celestis payload. Emotionally, it was incredible. Obviously, I did write a blog post about it, which really only covers pre-launch. It doesn't really cover the memorial service or the launch itself. Those are upcoming. It was incredible just because I met a few people, at the event. Even though, we come from different backgrounds and different life experiences, we have a lot remarkably in common. I think we humans have more in common than we don't sometimes.
Absolutely.
Despite everything. And the launch itself was really awesome, but that first stage landing, oh my God, that was incredible. If anybody can get out to see a first stage landing at Landing Zone 1 or whatever at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, just do it. I don't want to spoil too much of it for y'all, but it's like nothing on this planet. So you guys got to come out and see it. That's like a bucket list experience. So it was just incredible. I'm really still processing what all happened just because, for me, the really important part was just being able to mingle with the families and help them out. And also you realize that this whole thing, the launch, everything, it's really bigger than ourselves, and it's really cool. I'm very glad to work with a company that does something like this, where we can give people their final wishes. And I think it's something bigger than all of us. And I love working, in a field like that. So it's really awesome. And so I see you've been busy too, right?
Yes, I have. Hasn't May just been the craziest month?
Yeah.
So much has been going on. Anyway, when I was at the gala at the start of the month, I was introduced by Nicole Stott to Amanda Lee Falkenberg, who is a composer, and she has composed a symphony called the Moon Symphony. It's about various moons in our solar system, Ganymede, Titan, and the seventh movement is about our moon. So it's 7 movements in total. And Amanda invited me down to watch the London Symphony Orchestra record the symphony. So I was one of 10 people in the room with the orchestra at St. Luke's Chapel in London, near the Barbican Centre, watching one of the best orchestras in the world sight read their way through this incredible symphony, which is Amanda has composed. We're going to get her on to talk about her at some point because it's really quite special what she's done. The 7th movement, when they were playing that, everyone was just in tears. It was so powerful, but it was just such a great experience. You had the composer there with her score, making sure the orchestra were playing it correct. You had the conductor communicating with the orchestra and the composer and the people that were recording to make sure they had everything. But you just had this incredible group of people. An orchestra is possibly the ultimate team performance. Everyone's got to be on their A game for it to work. It was just amazing to witness. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And the fact it's all connected with science as well. So they had scientists, some of the other guests there were the scientists who have helped Amanda, and they've worked on missions to do with those moons. like Cassini and things like that. It's just nuts. So the whole thing is pretty special project, and I got to witness this. There's another part going on where they're going to add some choral stuff.
That's awesome.
Which I'm sure would be amazing, but just hearing the orchestra on their own without the choral stuff was breathtaking. Absolutely breathtaking. So that's what I've been up to, or one of the things I've been up to. But before we get on to the interview, and we've got a great interview lined up, and I know there's some people here who probably are only here for that and we're 5 minutes in. But Emily, you've also written another article, which I think will lead in nicely to our interview. And it's about Judy Resnick, one of the astronauts who died on the Challenger disaster. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I will also put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, basically, the more I tried to research about her life, because I wanted to write like a definitive biographical article about her, or something of that nature. And I started trying to dig into her life, and I found out that a lot of existing biographical sources, and, unfortunately her parents have passed away, probably years ago. So I there's no parents to talk to. She didn't have any children. She wasn't married. So, I tried to look for some biographical sources on her, and it was incredibly difficult. I did find what I was told was the definitive article about her, and for many reasons, it was very problematic. And I felt strongly that, okay, that is not the right source to be going on, just because it really was not about her. It was about the people she knew. And I didn't like that approach at all. So at that point, I sort of just gave up, and I feel that way, even though this is a completely different astronaut. I sort of feel the same way with Jack Swigert, but there's probably more source material about him, which is crazy. I just felt like maybe, it's not that I want to give up, but it's just sort of like maybe that story should belong to her, not to anybody else. Maybe I'm not the right person to gatekeep that story. That was basically what I wrote about. That's not to say, I'm territorial about it. I think there's probably a number of great writers or a great writer out there who could probably do the job right, and I would love to see that. But for me, I just felt like maybe it's not me, maybe I should just let her rest in peace. I don't know. So that's basically what my article was about.
Yeah. And I think I understand that as well. I've tried to write songs about emotional events in my life or other people's lives before, and I found it really difficult at times and just had to walk away from it because it's just not been right for me. So yeah, I understand that thought process, but isn't it crazy how few biographies there are about the astronauts who died on Challenger? There's probably one about Krista, but I can't think of any others.
Yeah, I think Krista has one, but her mother wrote it. So, I mean, she had a family member, a surviving family member. And there was really a lot of material about McAuliffe, because she did a ton of interviews and she was a fairly public figure, whereas Judy's a little different. She was a famous person, but not a public figure. She was kind of private. So it's a little different with her.
But isn't it even surprising that NASA in the aftermath didn't do a more focused biography of all of them?
Nope, you're correct. They did not.
Granted, the internet didn't exist, so how would they get that stuff out? It's not that they couldn't get it out, but it's not the same, is it? As it is now, where they could have a web page dedicated to those astronauts, for example. But it's amazing that didn't happen.
I have feelings about why, but I think the way they dealt with Challenger was completely different from the way they dealt with Columbia. Whereas Columbia, they really were open about the investigation. They were very respectful to the deceased astronauts' families. With Challenger, they were trying to kind of rug sweep everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different culture.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, go and check out that article. Right, so although Judy is a real person, I do feel like this is a good place to segue into today's feature. So there's a lot of parallels with the story that are being told in For All Mankind and what Judy was part of. So For All Mankind has absolutely captivated both Emily and I over the last couple of years, and regular listeners of the podcast will know that we bring it up a hell of a lot, even when it's not relevant. It's almost brought up as much as Skylab. Anyway, we interviewed the creator Ronald Moore in our 25th episode in February 2021, and in episode 13 we spoke to Eric Laddin, who played Gene Kranz in season 1. So for those of you who don't know anything about it, the premise of this show is what would have happened if the Soviets landed on the moon before the Americans. The season 1 focused on the direct aftermath of that in 69 and the early 70s, using a combination of fictional people alongside our real-life heroes of the space age. And it made the great assumption there would then have been a race to get a base on the moon and also to get the first woman on the moon, thus accelerating the pace at which NASA had female astronauts by a number of years from real life. And that included a character called Danielle Poole, who is played by today's guest, Krys Marshall. Now, Danielle is not only in the first group of female astronauts selected to join NASA in For All Mankind, but she is also the first African-American astronaut. So season 2 then jumped ahead into the 80s to find out what would have happened next. And we got glimpses of Skylab Doctor, the space shuttle, and other wonderful things, and possibly the most dramatic ending I've ever experienced in watching TV.
Season 3 will bring us into the 1990s, and from the looks of the trailer, it looks like we're going to Mars. We're going to make sure within this interview that there are no spoilers for the upcoming season, but we can't promise you there won't be spoilers for things that happened already in seasons 1 and 2. So if this is a show that you want to watch, then go and do so, please, before listening to this interview. And you should really watch it. It is really wonderful on so many levels. Anyway, that's enough of us from now. Let's go and talk to Krys Marshall.
Okay, we're off to a good start. Play it cool.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Krys. This is a real honor for both of us. I'd like to go way back if that's okay. So how did you end up in For All Mankind? And be honest with us. We won't be offended if the answer is no. Before you got the role, were you someone who was into space travel and the Apollo program?
Okay, first of all, thank you guys for having me so much. I adore you both on Twitter. I'm so glad that we made this happen. I also did not realize that, Dave, you're freaking English. I just got back from London this morning. Oh my God, that's crazy. So I came in for the casting office for a totally different show, having nothing to do with the show at all. It was Junie and Libby are our casting directors, and they were casting a Lena Waithe show about lesbians in their 20s. And the show is called 20s. So I came in and I was wearing like a short sundress and a jean jacket and sneakers with no socks on, and I was ready to play this lesbian in her 20s. And so the audition went well, and I left. And as I was like heading back to the studio parking lot, the intern comes running after me, and she's like, hey, Krys, do you have a second to read this thing about NASA? And I was like, NASA? I mean, you may as well have asked me, like, give me the square root of 85 billion. Like, I'm just like, know nothing about science, know nothing about technology. So I'm like, okay. So they hand me the sides. It's like 10 pages of material. And they're like, yeah, go ahead, take a look over and, take your time. But of course, when someone's expecting for you to come back in straight away, take your time really means like, take 8 minutes. So I take that 8 minutes to go over the scenes. And one was a really technical scene that actually ended up being a scene that Sarah Jones played with Ed Baldwin when she's in the fighter pilot and she's, starting to screw up and Ed's giving her a hard time. So that was one audition scene, and it was super, super technical. Then there was another scene that actually got cut from episode 4 where I explained some really complicated mathematical thing. Again, here I am reading this like, Lord have mercy, just get me out of here. But then the scene that I was able to glom onto was my scene with Clayton and with Gordo in the bar in episode 5, season 1. And the scene was just so beautiful and it was so exciting. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to hold on to this. I know how to act. I know I can do that part. So I worked on that. And then in my mind just said, I'm not going to be able to memorize this in the time that I have. So let me just go in there and kind of improv it. And so I did. And I left feeling really proud of myself, but knowing like I didn't get that job and that's okay. And so this is a funny story I've actually never told before. I'd had like a downslope. I had just done another show. I had a few months off where I hadn't been working. And so a friend was like, maybe you should get into class. And so this was my first day of this acting class. So I leave the audition, I head to acting class, and the class is not for me. I'm not enjoying it. The teacher's giving me a hard time. He's busting my balls. And during the half-hour break, I see that I have like 11 missed calls. And my manager is like, where the are you? Answer the phone. And I was like, I was in acting class. He's like, leave class now. You booked this job. So I'm like, what? So I like grab my things. I'm like, sorry, gotta go. Excuse me. As I step over the out of work actors to go be a working actor. And so, yeah, the next day we signed the contract. The next day after that, I was on set.
Wow.
So I had no time whatsoever to even acclimate to what this world was going to be. Of course, I did the best I could and tried to, Google what is Cold War when, and just kind of get a gist of what this even is. My husband was great and was super instrumental. And one of my first questions is I was like, okay, baby, so where was the Cold War? Where did it mostly take place? He's like, yeah, the Cold War is like a metaphor, hun. And I'm like, no, I get it. It's a metaphor, but was it in St. Petersburg or like in Moscow mostly? Where was it? Where was the fighting? He's like, there's a Cold War because they're, okay, you gotta keep Googling. So yeah, I learned on the job.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much.
That's awesome. All right. You talked a little bit you just kind of, jumped into the role, but as you got a little further in, what kind of research did you do to become an Apollo astronaut? We see Danielle Poole, we see her move from the early 1970s, she's got a flippy hairdo, and now she's in the 1990s, Was there anybody who, maybe inspired you from that time or beyond?
Yeah. So, once you get through the first day of school jitters, you just remind yourself, I know how to act. I know that part. I went to school for acting. I know how to do this. So you just, whether you're playing an engineer or an astronaut, or you're playing a character from a galaxy far away, all you can connect to truly in the beginning is the character. So I just read the script. I read about the civil rights era because our story starts in 1969. We know that Danielle is 25 at the start of the season, so that means that she started off in segregated schools. So I did research on that experience, research on the music of that time period, listened to a lot of Aretha Franklin and Marvin Gaye and the music, like Sam Cooke, musicians that were both pop culture musicians, but at the same time, freedom fighters with their music. And so really immersed myself in that world because I knew that there's no way that I can even come close to having the information that a NASA engineer has in the time that I was allotted. But I know how to tell a story. I know how to connect to a character. So that part I can do. Thankfully, Ron Moore is just a stinking genius and has the most incredible people who work with us and who are technical consultants. So Garrett Reisman, who is actually a former NASA astronaut and has been to the International Space Station 3 times. He works on our show and he's with us on set all the time. And so he gave us a little astronaut crash course. He took us to lunch on the Sony lot, and it was myself and Sonia, Jody, and Sarah Jones. And the 4 of us just sat down and asked him all of the silly questions that you might ask, where do you pee? And how hungry are you when you're there? And just all the questions to try to get into the experience of what it's like to be an astronaut. And then we also have Mike and Denise Akuda, who have been with Ron for many, many years, and they worked with him back on, I believe it was Deep Space Nine was maybe their first show together, and have been with him ever since. And they're just incredibly talented technical advisors, and they understand the world so well. And they're great at not, just beep, boop, bop, boop, 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 beep. Now I'm a scientist. But you say hey, if I'm in this capsule, what are the different things that I'm doing with this joystick? I don't want to just move it around and be an actress in a TV show. So they're great about that and helping to explain in layman's terms what all of this stuff is. And then aside from that, in our writing department, we have David Weddle and Bradley Thompson, who've been a team forever. They were also with Ron way back in the Star Trek days. One of them is a licensed pilot and loves to fly, so he's great and talks to us all the time about what that experience is like. So we're just surrounded by so many geniuses, and I don't say that lightly, that you really feel cradled and you're able to do your work as an actor, knowing that these guys have that part covered.
So I think for me, when I realized that this show was more than just for space geeks like us. Was episode 7 of season 1, the Hi Bob episode.
Hi Bob.
Hi Bob. Yeah, I mean, it just took the show to the next level, in my opinion, in terms of, obviously covering some dark themes, but that Hi Bob sketch was just wonderful. Was that hard to do, or was it just a real laugh?
It's probably no surprise that Michael, Joel, and I got on like a house on fire. I mean,
you could tell.
Our director, Mira, would have to wait for us to just finish telling poop jokes before it's like, okay, can we please get back to work, you three? And I feel like they really treated me. I mean, our dynamics are like the dynamics on a show. I would talk, no one would listen. Joel would say something, we would yell at him. Michael would make a joke. He also plays guitar. He'd entertain us. He taught us all kinds of New Zealand popular card games.
Nice.
I learned euchre and pinochle and other weird old-timey card games. There's just so much downtime when you're on set, and the mornings are early. So, you're in at 5 a.m. and you're sitting beside each other with the makeup trailer, and then you're on set and you're there for 12 hours. Then you're back in the trailer again, taking the makeup off. And so we really became like a band of brothers in that time. And it was just delightful. So a lot of the stuff that we did in the Hi Bob sketch, of course, a lot of it is direct mimicry from the episode, but then a ton of it is just improvised. Joel, I think, really has this persona of being like this, debonair, handsome, serious actor. And he's really, really funny in real life. And Michael is too. And so we would just riff back and forth and have fun with each other. And a lot of the things that came about naturally just came from our dynamic together. That was one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite episodes of the series. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such a great episode. And it's become a little bit of a cult thing amongst the fans of the show, isn't it? Meet a fellow fan, you say, hi, Bob. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the coolest parts of the last season was when Danielle single-handedly changed a nasty international crisis with the Apollo Soyuz docking, really just saving the whole world.
Yeah.
I'm sure you researched that mission. Were there any things you incorporated from the real Apollo Soyuz into doing that mission during that series?
So one of the things I love about our show, and it's more overt when you see it in the historical renderings, like you'll remember in season 2, Tracy has a glitzy interview on the Johnny Carson show. That was a real interview with Sandra Dee, I believe it was. And so all of the Johnny Carson stuff stayed the exact same. And they were somehow, with the special VFX team, were able to slot Sarah into what looked like the same lighting and the same reverse shot, and it's pretty incredible. So the same was true, not exactly the same, but similar was done with the Soyuz Apollo handshake, or Apollo Soyuz handshake. There are real shots of those astronauts, and we really did the best we could with the stunt team to make the exact same hand gestures, the same thumbs up, the same peace signs. There's like an awkward kind of hug that we are sort of doing, and all of that was very deliberately plotted out. We didn't just sort of like go on wires and kind of go for it. I really, again, much like I enjoyed the work I did with Michael and Joel in season 1, I really enjoyed my time with my Russians in season 2, because we almost had like a little show within a show. And that experience of working in these tight, crammed spaces and really spending a ton of time together. Nikola is the actor who plays the lead Russian, and he and I are just really good friends now. And it was a really awesome experience.
So obviously no spoilers, but this season focuses on Mars. It looks like there's sort of a joint commercial NASA Mars mission or missions. We also see the original Apollo astronauts from the previous seasons, and they're growing older. Without providing any spoilers, obviously, how do you think the fans of the previous seasons are going to take all of this? I'm almost positive they're going to kill off somebody I like,
Emily,
Big sigh.
Emily,
Big sigh.
You
Big
know
sigh.
damn well we're going to kill somebody you love. You know that. It wouldn't be us. Pick the person you love and watch them die. That's what the show should be called.
Last season I was a disaster, by the way. Thank you guys for doing that. Oh my God.
It gives me the shakes to even think about it. And, when you make a movie, from the day you start what scene 1 is like and what scene 91 is like. With this, our writers are little kleptomaniacs. They're stealing bits and pieces from us. So they're watching us interact. And it's no secret that as a cast, we're really close. So we get together and we have barbecues and birthday parties and baby showers, and we spend a lot of time together. So we have this long-standing rapport with each other that they see, and Ron admits it. He's like, we see it and we sneak it in. We love it. So with that being said, it is as devastating for us to find out that Tracy and Gordo die as it is for the audience. None of us knew. No one was expecting it. Our writers deliberately they break the season at the beginning before the actors come in. And they have a gist, of course, of where this is going to go. And they have the first handful of episodes written. But as time goes on, as they're watching the stories develop and as they're receiving the dailies, they're making changes and adjustments. So I believe Ron and Matt and Ben were saying that they had kicked around the idea of killing either Tracy or Gordo around episode 2 or 3. And then the writer's room said, no, come on, you guys, are you freaking crazy? We can't do that. Everybody loves Tracy and Gordo. And then the conversation would go away. And then someone else would come back and go, we could kill him. Come on, guys, this is ridiculous. We're not going to kill him. Just stop talking about it. Let's move on to the rest of the season. And then around episode 7 or 8, it just became more and more apparent that this would properly gut the audience and would be a really beautiful way to memorialize this love that has come full circle in a lot of ways. So that was tough. That was really tough. And it makes me, as both a cast member on the show and also just a fan of the show, I definitely don't play it cool when it comes to our show. I love it. But it makes me so happy when folks like you guys say, man, I'm still not over that. So with that said, get ready to feel that way again.
Oh, God.
No.
Oh, my God. I'm already like...
Oh, God. My heart has just started racing.
Yeah, just seeing the trailer, I was freaking out.
Yeah. But I think that's the beauty of what we do is that, there really is no room for ego on our show. I mean, yes, you could say like, oh, these people are the leads, but it really isn't that. That's not the case. There are entire episodes where you don't see Margot at all, or you don't see Ed at all, and you spend the entire episode with Danielle and these Russians, or with Aleda and her life. So, that's what I love is that we're never too committed to anything. We're just committed to telling a really beautiful story. And sometimes that commitment to a beautiful story also means sacrificing folks we love.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So did I find a way to answer without answering?
Yes, you did. Thank you. I am terrified. I don't even want to watch episode 1. I'm joking. I'm like, I don't even want to click on that mess because I'm going to be a mess like 2 minutes in. All right.
I'm suitably nervous for watching, but also excited at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think the wonderful thing about For All Mankind is that there are deeper themes, and that it shows how an alternative world could be more progressive in some ways, and yet there's still struggles that exist. It's something that Emily and I have talked about to death. To young people watching the show who may not know the real history of spaceflight, they may get really inspired by this. And obviously, you know how much representation matters. Do you feel some sense of responsibility with that? Do you see that with any of the interactions you have with fans of the show online? Are there young women or young Black people who come to you and say they're inspired to get into space because of this show?
Yes. And it is one of my favorite experiences. You're 100% right, Dave. Representation absolutely matters. Something I spoke about in the final episode of the For All Mankind podcast is that, when I was growing up in our real timeline, there really were no examples of what it looks like to be Black and be an astronaut. Mae Jemison was the first Black female astronaut in, I think, 1991 or 1992. And in the course of doing the podcast and interviewing with current and former NASA employees, I discovered that there's only been 2 since then. I was shocked. I think like most folks, you just find yourself believing that once the glass ceiling is broken, then it's broken for good, and it's great for Black folks in space. And So for me to have discovered that there's only been 2 since May, and the last was one of my guests on the show, and her last mission was in 2006. So that's wild to me. That's wild to me that it's been more than 15 years since there has been, and that makes me angry. And it reminds me that we still have to continue to forward progression in the world of representation and diversity constantly. There have been gay astronauts who've come out since their time, but there's never been an open gay astronaut at the ISS or in space ever. That was also a shock to me. So when I think about myself, I always thought, that the limit was maybe I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer. But what influenced me to become an actor was watching The Cosby Show and watching Lisa on, Saved by the Bell and things like that, and being like, oh, wow, that's cool. She's Black. I'm Black. I could be an actress. But when you're little, that really, you look around you and, if you grow up eating spicy food, then you like spicy food. And if you grow up hearing French, you learn French. If you grow up seeing Black people do certain kinds of jobs, and you just assume that that's where the limit exists. So for me, hearing about Mae Jemison and her time in space was akin to also hearing about Sojourner Truth or, George Washington Carver, these like big names of African Americans who did special things a really long time ago, and not realizing that history, African American history, is U.S. history, and it's also present day. It's being made right now. So for our show, I remember when we had our season premiere, and it was this huge, gorgeous event at this Westwood Theater, and there were helicopters and red carpet and thousands of people. And I remember pulling up with my mom and my manager and my agent, and the streets are blocked off, 1 square mile. And I said, oh man, the streets are blocked off. How are we going to get to my premiere? And he looked at me and said, oh, the streets are blocked off for your premiere. So it was still like my mind couldn't believe, like, oh, wow, this is a really big deal. And one of the interviews I had on the red carpet was with a journalist from, I believe it was from Variety. Her name is Angelique. And she asked me, do you feel pressure being the only Black cast member in the lead cast of the show and playing this Black astronaut? And I said, I definitely feel pressure. Absolutely. Because I know that I don't get the luxury of just being Krys Marshall. I have to be a sort of monolith in a lot of ways for what it means to be a Black woman. And is this rendition of it going to be pleasing to my people and to women and to people from the South and to whoever? But the only thing that gives me solace is recognizing that I stand on the shoulders of folks who've already done this. They've done it before me. They've paved a way, and I'm grateful for it. And so in my own way, I both get to stand on those shoulders and also help the next gal up and prop her up on my shoulders. And if we can create more women who tell stories like Uhuru from Star Trek or like the lead actresses on Foundation, like we're beginning to see that seeing a Black woman in this position as a commander, as a leader, she gets to both be a representation of her culture, but also so much more. At the end of the day, she's just a human telling her story. And that really excites me. So yeah, it's pressure, but I can handle it.
I love that Danielle in the show is human because...
And a Star Trek fan.
Yeah. And in a lot of... I don't know how to word this, but in a lot of shows, there's a trope that, the minority person, like the woman or the Black woman or whoever, has to be like the strong person. And I hate that because I'm like, let them be a real person with vulnerabilities. Like there's this part in For All Mankind where it's after, your husband on the show commits suicide and you're in the car and you're like, I don't want to, you could tell Danielle's like, I don't want to go into, the outpost.
The outpost.
She doesn't want to go in there. She's scared, but she's like, I got to go in there. And I love that because it portrayed her as somebody who is like, obviously this is a pioneer, but it's somebody with real anxiety and real vulnerability. And I love that touch because I hate it when shows, portray people as, all one thing or, it just doesn't, it's it's not real life, you know? Everybody's going to have a little bit of vulnerability. So that was just an observation I had, and I really loved how you played that.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that. And that's important to me, as an actor. Yes, I'm a Black woman, but I also grew up listening to Tori Amos and Ani DeFranco and Alanis Morissette and watching MTV. Like, I think that a lot of our cultural divides actually don't exist because some of my favorite foods have nothing to do with where I'm from or my background or my heritage, just the fact that I just really like kale or whatever. And so my favorite things about Danielle are that not only is she a Trekkie, but she's just a TV geek. She just loves TV. And this is what I mean about our writers being kleptos. I, Krys, am a TV geek. So they see these things about us and they're like, oh, this is a lovely touch. Okay, great. Danielle wasn't originally from the South. It actually wasn't decided, but I'm from Atlanta. So then they thought, okay, Danielle's from Tennessee. She's from Memphis. So when we find these ways to steep and soak a character in sort of normalcy and pedestrian kind of things, it makes them not feel so far away. It reminds you like, oh, she's just a person who's experiencing life. And what you mentioned about her vulnerability in that moment of like, I want to go in and talk to my friends, but I'm terrified. We've all been there. We've all sat in a car that we've parked and just like worked ourselves up to go and have that conversation. This season 3, I won't spoil it, but they're leading in the direction of Danielle's humanity. There are some decisions and some choices she makes that I don't like at all. And that was really difficult for me. And I would actually love to talk to you guys again once the season is out and we can just really go into it so you can remind me of this. But in the same way that it became a big talking point of Karen's character sleeping with her best friend's son is not the same, of course, but a similar decision where you're like, wait a minute, Danielle, I thought I knew you. I thought I understood you. And then you realize like, no. These are human beings and they're going to disappoint you. They're going to frustrate you. They're going to do things you don't want them to do. And that's what makes them human. And for Danielle to always be, like you said, the strong Black woman who's always in the position of right. How boring. How totally one-dimensional and boring would that be? So I'm so stoked for you guys to get to see it.
Yeah, me too. And everything you've just said there is absolutely spot on as well. Any of the TV shows, which I love, have characters which are flawed. And even the characters you love are flawed. And the flaws sometimes make you love them even more. Sometimes they make you question them a little bit, but that's fine as well because it makes it more real and more human. And that's important. Also, I just want to bring up, I loved your answer to my last question, which I appreciate was quite deep. I have some good news for you. I know it doesn't mean that the problem is solved, but currently we do have a Black woman on the International Space Station. Her name is Jessica.
My goodness.
Her name is Jessica Watkins.
Oh wait, I did know this. Oh my goodness. Yes, I did know this. Yes.
And I think potentially she's going to be the first woman on the moon. I hope so as well because she's a geologist and she couldn't be more qualified. But also we had the first Black female of a pilot of a space vehicle last September as well in Dr. Cyan Proctor. So I know it's only 2 extra names, but yeah. It steps forward, isn't it? Which is important. As you said before that, it was over 10 years, and that's too long.
That's huge. Thank you for that correction. Yeah.
It's more since you recorded that podcast, things have changed. Which is rather than correcting you.
I agree. It should, but it should be more than I'm like 2 since 2006. That's not. Like that, I'm sorry that it's not enough.
Absolutely,
but whatever.
So anyway, away from For All Mankind, where might we next see Krys Marshall? Is there anything you're working on that you can tell us about right now?
I just did a guest stint on another Apple show. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. So there's that. If you have Apple TV Plus, keep watching. You'll see me on another Apple show. But it's not, I guess maybe not. That's not been publicly announced just yet. But of course, as you guys know, season 3 premieres in less than 2 weeks, which is super exciting. And I am not allowed to break any news about a season 4. So that's all I'll say.
when we spoke to Ron, he said he's planned 7 seasons. So obviously it depends on lots of other factors, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the show is going from strength to strength, and I think Emily and I would both be gutted if it was cancelled. And
tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, yeah. Anyway, I think we should wrap this up now. This has been wonderful. Hopefully we'll speak to you again. Wish you all the success for the upcoming season, and hopefully that it will wow everyone as the first 2 have as well. And thank you for joining us.
This was awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. And yeah, let's definitely talk again once the season is done, because then we can really get into the nitty gritty.
Absolutely.
Yes, I can't wait. All right.
When you were a little girl growing up in Akron, Ohio, did you say, gee, I'd like to be an astronaut someday?
No, I really didn't think about it until about 4 years ago when NASA announced that they were looking for astronauts who would be engineers and scientists on the space shuttle. And it was accidental that I heard about it, and I just took a chance and applied.
Hey, Emily, I just want to congratulate you, because before she joined us in the Zoom chat, you made out that you were quite nervous and you thought you might even press leave. But not only did you stay, you kept your cool. I thought you handled that pretty well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was fangirling the whole time. Krys Marshall is my favorite actor on the whole show. Danielle Poole for life, although I hope I don't hate her after this season.
Oh, dear.
Oh, geez. I hope I don't hate her, but I'm trying to put together we all make mistakes speech, to justify whatever she did,
Yeah, that was such a fascinating interview. Obviously, we know Krys as Danielle Poole, right? That's how we know of her. Yes, we follow her on Twitter and Instagram and things like that, but we know of her as a character. So it's always really lovely when you meet an actor who you know as a character, and they're just really lovely and really intelligent and really articulate and help you love the show even more. And I think that's exactly what we just experienced. But Emily, how nervous are you about season 3 right now?
There's this part of me that doesn't even want to watch it now. I'm like, I don't even want to know what happened. I'm probably too emotionally invested into that show, especially, what they did to my mom and dad last season, and they did to Tracy and Gordo. I'm still a mess. So yeah, I'm very nervous about why. I will watch next season, but I'm extremely like, oh my God, what are they going to do? And poor Molly, man. Molly, dude, Molly's got a gray hair and a cane. I'm like, what did they do to her?
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Jumping ahead 10 years at a time. I think it's a really great concept, but it's an interesting one, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops into season 4, if, fingers crossed, there is a season 4. It means there's gonna have to be heartbreak, because you're gonna see these characters at different stages of their life, having gone through a lot more than we're necessarily gonna see on the screen. So I think that's another fascinating aspect of this show, which is why we love it.
I mean, it's nice to think that we're all going to live to be 100 or something, but that's not always the case, so we're going to see them age, and that in itself, I mean, I'm just speculating. I have no idea what's going to happen on the show, but that in itself is a challenge, because, some of y'all in your 40s, might know this already. Things don't work as well as they did. Your knee starts to maybe give out, just stuff like that. And it's like, it's interesting to see, it's going to be interesting to see, how they further age over time, and how, they deal with that. Somebody like Ed Baldwin, who's like the ultimate alpha male, he's not going to like aging that much.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that back to the real world. I've seen some wonderful interviews with Alan Shepard in the 90s, just before he died, and you can already tell that he knows he's not the man he was, right? And yet he also still feels like he is the man he was. There's that real juxtaposition going on in his own mind. You can really see it within those interviews. I think particularly the ones where he knew he was ill as well. It's a really fascinating thing to study someone over a long period of time, especially that alpha male or someone who's got a distinct personality type. I think that's a fascinating thing, which this show enables us to explore, because we only see them once every 10 years. It's
going to be really cool. I love how this show is just so multifaceted, and there's just so many layers to it as well. Like, it's not, it's nothing is really just simple. Yeah. That's real life, and to me, I just love that. It seems more realistic than, okay, we did this and everything went just fine. There was no adversity whatsoever. some people might disagree with me on that. I've heard some people say, oh, they have problems all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but it keeps it, interesting, and at the pace technology is moving in that universe, they're probably less risk averse than they would be in real life. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. One thing that we got reminded about in this interview was that for the last season, For All Mankind had their own podcast, and it was really good. And we did talk about it on this podcast as well. It's definitely worth checking out if you want to find out more about the show and about their journey at learning about things that were going on. I think it's really great, and their explanations of some of the things that were going on. It was a really good marketing tool when COVID was going on for a show, I guess. It was a really nice way of connecting everyone who was at home watching the show. I loved it, so I really like that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love everything about that show. You guys can't see this if you're just listening to the podcast, but here I got all the patches.
I was going to say, you're hoping they do a season 3 patches. Have you got your eye out for that?
Yes, I will buy them the second they're released. So.
I thought you'd say that. So as always, the full interview will be going up on video form on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/space and things. Thanks to everyone who's already joined us over there. If you haven't done so yet and you're willing and able, we would love to have you. And you'll find out all about the upcoming interviews we have got lined up as well. In the show notes, I will put links to all of Krys Marshall's social media accounts and a link to the trailer for season 3 of For All Mankind. But don't forget to get in contact once the show starts airing next Friday to let us know your thoughts on the episodes. I can't wait. It's going to come out Friday, June 11th on Apple TV.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 10, you can tell the world that we have arrived.
Okay, in what is possibly the rarest of things on this podcast, since I recorded the news segment last week on Wednesday, we have not had a single launch. And it doesn't look like we're going to have one until after this podcast comes out. What's up with the rocket companies?
Right? They're just slacking this week.
Yeah.
Wow. Get to work. I'm joking. Although talking of launches, I do think this counts. NASA has released a video from the 25th launch of the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars. Now, this launch took place on April 8th, and we talked about it at the time, but the video has only just been released. It was a record-breaking flight for the helicopter, which flew across a distance of 2,310 feet, 704 meters, at a speed of 12 miles per hour, which is 19 kilometers an hour.
Thank you.
With a maximum altitude of 33 feet, which is 10 meters.
Impeccable conversion skills there, Emily. Great job. Love that.
Yeah, impeccable math.
Absolutely, impeccable math.
Yeah, or maths, as you always say.
Yes, thank you.
The flight lasted 163.1 seconds, although the video is sped up, and the whole flight is captured in a 30-second clip, which used the downward-looking navigational camera to observe the sands below. It's really quite something when you watch. Dave will put the video in our show notes, which you can find on our website, or by clicking on the link in the description of this podcast in your podcast provider.
Yeah. So I found out why we've only just got it. And one of the reasons is because it takes so long to download a video that's that long from Mars, obviously. I know that sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but you still forget, right, that it actually does take that long. But yes, I will put that in the show notes. Please go and check that out. Also, while we're talking about Mars, NASA's Maven spacecraft, which has been orbiting the planet since 2014, went into a protective safe mode due to a navigational system glitch. Maven is short for Mars Atmosphere and Volatile Evolution Mission. And its job is to study how Mars lost its surface water. The spacecraft entered the safe mode on February 22nd, and while it's in that mode, all of the science instruments are shut down while awaiting for instructions from flight controllers. Pretty clever, obviously. NASA has since managed to turn off the safe mode on April 19th, but the craft is now only operating to a limited capacity, with the primary antenna pointed at the Earth to maintain a high rate of communications with controllers on the Earth. Normally, this antenna is used as a communication relay for the rovers on the ground of the planet. So all of the scientific equipment is online, it just can't collect any data at the moment. So the team is currently working to resume nominal science by the end of this month.
Wow. Meanwhile, NASA has also announced that the next wet dress rehearsal for the Artemis 1 rocket will take place on June 19th. This is when the rocket gets fueled on the pad and goes through a complete countdown without actually launching. This is the brand new mega rocket, which will hopefully be taking humans back to the moon in a few years if it completes this test successfully. We will see the first uncrewed launch, which will hopefully take place sometime in August. No definitive date has been confirmed for this until the wet test has been completed. This will be the second attempt, at the dress rehearsal. The first one was attempted earlier this year, but ran into some issues on the pad, which meant that the rocket had to be brought back to the vehicle assembly building. That's the big giant building at Kennedy Space Center for some maintenance.
NASA has also been in defense mode following a report on a website called Space Explored. Emily, this is going to get you mad, I guarantee you. So this website claimed that hypergolic propellant leaked into the heat shield of the SpaceX Dragon capsule, which was used for the latest Axiom 1 mission. And this leak could have impacted the integrity of that heat shield, which apparently caused dangerously excessive wear during re-entry. This report cited unnamed sources at both NASA and SpaceX. It went on to speculate that the same problem could happen on the Crew 4 mission, which is currently in orbit on the International Space Station. Now, NASA have released a very strong statement claiming this is incorrect and stated that the data associated with Dragon's recent crew re-entry was normal and that the system performed as designed without dispute. That's really strong language there. They say that there has not been a hypergol leak during the return of a crewed Dragon mission, nor any contamination with the heat shield causing excessive wear. The NASA statement goes on to talk about how SpaceX and NASA have extensive testing in place for the heat shields, and as a result of these, the heat shield for the upcoming Crew 5 mission has indeed been changed and will be retested. And they're using this as proof that their safety standards are more than adequate to ensure that the crews get home safely. This is one of those crazy stories. How does a website end up having the gall to release a story like that? And yet NASA say how wrong it was. So apparently the website has now updated their article, including a NASA statement, but yet they've not taken their original story down, which is just crazy. I don't understand how that happens.
Yeah, I'm just hoping NASA's right, because
Me too.
Crew 4 is still up there, and I don't even want to say this out loud, but we know what happened the last time NASA didn't say anything about a heat shield.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I have no issue with people calling out safety issues if there are legitimate safety issues. But if this is just made up, if this is actually just made up, then that's so irresponsible. I know they've made this statement, but I feel like they should do more than just make a statement. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that's grounds for court cases and legal, like, especially when you've got families of the astronauts who are on that Crew 4 mission on the ground.
Yeah, they're still up there, and if you say something, wrong, and you mention names, technically that's libel, and that is a lawsuit. So yeah,
I'm sure they're sorting that out, or that they're in panic mode, but hopefully not.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
I guess we'll see. Yeah.
So a brand new startup company in California has emerged called Astro Forge and aims to become the first ever viable asteroid mining company. They formed in January of this year, but only came out of stealth mode on May 26th. They're raising $13 million in seed funding and have developed lab tested a new technology for processing asteroid material, and have even booked a ride on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket to test that tech out in orbit. It is unclear whether the family of Harry Stamper has been consulted on this. I don't want to close my eyes. Okay, I'll shut up. I'm sorry.
Amazing.
Nobody needed to hear that.
What I didn't expect to happen in this episode was to hear Emily sing Aerosmith.
It's horrible. Yeah, terrible. All right, I won't sing anymore.
Ben Affleck's also on standby for that Falcon 9 launch.
For this mission, right? Yeah.
And finally, on June 15th, a brand new attraction opens at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Center, Gateway, the Deep Space Launch Complex. It's a part museum and part 4D experience. It's a multi-level building at the far end of the rocket garden. Within that garden, some of you may have been there, we've spoken about it before, you've got loads of rockets of the past, but inside Gateway is a collection of the new and next for NASA and the space industry. Artifacts include the first flown SpaceX Dragon capsule to visit the ISS. It's not a Crew Dragon, but a Dragon nonetheless. It has the Orion Exploration Flight Test 1 capsule, which flew in 2014, a simulator for Boeing's Starliner crew spacecraft, and one of the side boosters from the first SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch. So it's pretty cool artifacts in there. The second floor apparently has an interactive floor-to-ceiling digital wall where you can learn about 40 different satellites and space probes, and it all eventually leads to a thing called Spaceport KSC, where visitors are transported to an airport of the future with 4 gates offering boarding to 4 destinations, which are Cosmic Wonders, Daring Explorers, Red Planet, and Uncharted Worlds. Essentially, it's a space simulator where you share the journey with 21 other people. Each journey lasts in about 4.5 minutes. So if you're planning a trip to KSC, your general admission ticket will give you access to this new attraction.
That really sounds cool. I think I shouldn't say this. I think I've seen the SpaceX capsule, and I think I've seen the Orion, but already.
They used to be in another part of KSC, so they've just moved them in.
Yeah, but that's still really cool. And the latter part of it, where you get, you can go for choose your own adventure, sounds like the Horizons ride at Epcot back in the day.
I think there's definitely some comparisons there, isn't there?
Yeah, it sounds like the Horizons ride, which was very retro. Well, I'm sure this new ride is a little more updated, but the old ride, you could go to like space, the desert, or undersea. And it was, I love that ride, but they tore that down like 30 something, like 30 years ago. It was so dated by the time they tore it down. But yeah, that's cool. I can't wait to go. I need to actually renew my, I did not renew my yearly pass last week because I was so busy, but I need to go back soon and renew my pass. Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Because Kennedy Space Center is obviously an hour and a bit away from Orlando, so it competes with Disney World for tourists, right? So it has to have this element of ride within it, which other air and space museums probably don't need to think about. But it does add a whole new dimension, an extra dimension to the visitor center, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you ever been to Disneyland? Affirmative.
That was definitely an e-ticket.
Roger that, Sally.
So that's it for this week. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm going to be on holiday next week, so we have a pre-recorded show with no news, but we'll get back up to date in a fortnight, and I'll be full speed ahead in the Planning Show 100, which I can assure you it's a show that will be worth joining our Patreon page for. So more details on that in the coming weeks.
By the way, for you American people, a fortnight is 2 weeks.
Oh, sorry.
Just
sorry.
So you know.
It's not
no, you're fine. I was not criticizing you. It's just there are probably a couple of Americans who are like, what is a fortnight?
I had no idea that was a British expression. Apologies.
Not really. Not to me, it's not. But some people might just be like, what is that? I don't know. But, oh, God. I wasn't. I'm sorry. Now I feel like I was correct.
No, it's all good.
Not.
I'm happy with that. Correct away. Translate to your American kin.
To our American gibberish. Yeah. Our American gibberish. Exactly. Thanks to all who have continued to support the podcast, either financially or by leaving a review or sharing it with your friends or by listening. But don't forget, in space, no one can hear you mean.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.